The police detective stood in my living room and said they were scaling back the search for Lily, my granddaughter, only 16. Mark, my son-in-law, nodded along, his face a mask of grief. "We have to be realistic, Mum," he said, the words like a slap. By the end of the week, the official investigation would be over. I waited until they left, until the house was silent, and then I walked straight to the garage. Mark had stacked his old filing boxes there after he moved his office. My hands trembled as I lifted the first lid. I was not going to let them give up on her. I was determined to find anything the police might have missed. A receipt, a note, a forgotten phone, anything that could be a clue. I felt an ache in my back from bending over, and a deeper ache in my heart as I remembered Lily's laugh. I was under pressure because Mark would be back from his grief support meeting in 2 hours. He had been so insistent we stop spending money on private investigators. Rummaging through mouldy tax returns and old manuals, I found nothing. Despair started to creep in. Then, my fingers brushed against a small, cold object taped underneath the bottom of a box. A key. A single brass key with a numbered fob from a storage facility across town. Mark never mentioned renting a storage unit. Why would he hide this? My pulse hammered in my ears. This was it. A place he didn't want anyone to know about. I clutched the key in my palm, its teeth biting into my skin. I had to get there before he realized it was missing. But as I turned to leave, my foot kicked a crumpled paper that had fallen out. I smoothed it out. It was a bank statement, over a year old, showing a massive withdrawal. The memo line was scribbled, but I could make out 2 words: debt clearance, and a name I didn't recognize. I drove to the storage facility, the key burning a hole in my pocket. The place was a maze of identical orange doors under a grey sky. Unit 114B. I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. The metal door rattled upwards, revealing a space not filled with old furniture, but with neat stacks of document boxes. My breath caught. This was no ordinary storage. I needed to search quickly and find proof linking this to Lily. There was a risk that Mark would discover my trespass. I felt the pressure mount with every car that passed the facility entrance. Anyone could be his. I opened the first box. It was full of financial records, loan applications, statements from banks I'd never heard of. The numbers made my head spin. Mark had debts I never imagined. Then, in a box labelled personal, I found a cheap, prepaid cell phone. It was dead, of course. But tucked beside it was a charger. My hands shook as I plugged it in, waiting for it to power on. The screen glowed to life. There were only a few numbers in the contacts. One was saved as the collector. A text message thread was still open. The last message from Mark read, "The package is delivered. Wire the rest." The date was the day after Lily disappeared. My blood ran cold. Package. My granddaughter? I scrolled up, my vision blurring. There was talk of a price, a transaction. This wasn't a kidnapping. This was a sale. I sat in my car, the prepaid phone heavy in my lap. I had to get this evidence to someone who could help. But who? The police had closed the case. Mark had them convinced it was a dead end. I now needed to copy everything and find a trustworthy lawyer. I was paralyzed by the fear that he would find out what I knew. I felt pressure everywhere. In the silence of my home, in the way my daughter, Sarah, looked at me with hollow eyes, still believing her husband was a victim. I drove to the public library, using their computer to research lawyers who specialized in family law and financial fraud. I printed out the text messages and took photos of the bank statements with my own phone. Every moment felt stolen, dangerous. As I was leaving, I saw Mark's car pull into the library parking lot. Had he followed me? I ducked behind a bookshelf, my heart pounding. He wasn't coming for me. He was meeting a man in a suit near the entrance. They spoke in low, urgent tones. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Mark hand the man an envelope. The man nodded, patted Mark on the shoulder, and left. It was a calm, professional exchange. This wasn't a man broken by his daughter's disappearance. This was a man closing a business deal. I called my oldest friend, Eleanor, whose son is a lawyer. I didn't tell her everything, just that I needed a discreet legal consultation about a family matter. She set up a meeting for the next morning. It was clear. I needed to get professional advice on how to use this evidence. I felt a gut-wrenching betrayal towards my own son-in-law, the man I'd welcomed into our family. I was under pressure because Mark was growing suspicious. He'd asked me twice yesterday what I was always scribbling in that notebook. I met with David, Eleanor's son, in a small, quiet cafe. I laid out the copies of the texts and statements. His face grew grim as he read. "This is very serious, Mrs. Gable," he said. "This suggests conspiracy and human trafficking. You need to go to the federal authorities, not the local police." He explained the process, the need for absolute secrecy. He warned me that Mark would likely panic if he sensed an investigation. I left the cafe feeling a sliver of hope for the first time in months. But when I got home, the front door was unlocked. I always lock it. I walked inside to find Mark sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. My notebook, where I'd written my thoughts and plans, was open in front of him. "Looking for something, Mum?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Mark's eyes were flat and cold. He pushed the notebook towards me. "You should be careful, poking into things you don't understand," he said. "An old woman like you could have a bad fall. It would be a shame." The threat hung in the air, naked and sharp. My focus shifted in an instant. It was no longer just about justice for Lily. It was about survival. The family I thought I had was completely shattered. I felt pressured by his physical presence, blocking my path to the phone. I forced a calm I didn't feel. "I was just worried about you, Mark. All these debts." I gestured vaguely. I thought maybe I could help. He studied me, suspicion etched on his face. He didn't believe me, but he also didn't know how much I truly knew. He stood up, towering over me. "Stay out of my business. For your own good." Then he left, taking my notebook with him. I waited until I heard his car pull away before I let my knees buckle. I sank into a chair, trembling. He had my notes. He knew I was suspicious. But he didn't know about the lawyer or the copies of the evidence I had hidden in a different, safer place. The game had changed. He thought he was warning an old woman to back down. He didn't realize he had just declared war on a grandmother with nothing left to lose. I waited until the sound of Mark's car faded completely before I allowed myself to move. My heart was still hammering against my ribs. He had my notebook. He knew I was digging. But he didn't know about the copies. I had to get them out of the house now. I had to get the evidence to a safety deposit box at my bank before he returned. The risk was huge. Every second I stayed felt like I was betraying Lily, and the fear had my hands trembling. I felt the pressure of time. Mark could return any minute, and if he found the copies, it would all be over. I went to the hall closet, to the old winter coat I never wore. I had sewn a plastic sleeve into the lining, holding the photos of the bank statements and the text messages. I slipped it out and into my purse. Then I called a taxi. I couldn't risk using my own car. He might have put a tracker on it. While I waited, I peered out the window, watching for any sign of him. The street was quiet. Too quiet. The taxi arrived. I gave the driver the address to my bank downtown. As we drove, I kept looking back, half expecting to see Mark's car following us. But there was nothing. At the bank, I went straight to the manager, a kind woman named Linda who knew me from my late husband's affairs. I rented a small safety deposit box and placed the evidence inside. I felt a small measure of relief locking it away. It was safe from Mark's hands. But as I turned to leave, I saw him. Mark was standing outside the bank's glass doors, talking on his phone. He hadn't seen me yet. My blood ran cold. How did he know I was here? I ducked behind a pillar, my mind racing. He couldn't have followed the taxi. Did he have someone watching me? I waited, my breath held, until he finished his call and walked away, heading toward a parked car down the street. It wasn't his car. It was a sleek, black sedan I didn't recognize. The driver's window rolled down, and Mark leaned in to speak with someone inside. I couldn't see who it was, but I saw Mark hand over an envelope. Then he nodded, and the car drove off. He was still doing business, and now he was watching me. I took a different taxi home, my mind reeling. Who was in that car? It had to be connected to Lily's disappearance. Now I needed to find out who was in that car and who it belonged to. I needed leverage. The danger was real. I was obviously being watched. The pressure was intensifying with every hour. When I got home, the house felt different. Had someone been inside? Nothing was out of place, but the air felt stale, watched. I went to the landline phone in the kitchen. I couldn't use my cell. If Mark was monitoring me, he might have tapped it. I called David, the lawyer. I told him what I saw. The black sedan, the envelope. He was silent for a moment. "This is getting dangerous, Mrs. Gable. You need to be very careful. I can make some discreet inquiries about that vehicle, but it will take time." He advised me to act normally, to not give any sign that I was onto them. I hung up, feeling more alone than ever. I decided to check Mark's study. Maybe he left something behind. The door was locked. He never locked it before. That was new. I found the spare key he hid in a fake rock in the garden, a secret he thought I didn't know about. I unlocked the door and went in. The room was neat. Too neat. He had cleaned it out. But then I noticed it. The faint outline of a square on his desk, where a photograph usually sat. It was a picture of him, Sarah, and Lily from last year's vacation. The frame was gone. Why would he remove that, unless he was erasing her? As I stood there, I heard the front door open. "Mum, are you home?" It was Sarah, my daughter. Her voice sounded tired, broken. I quickly locked the study door behind me and stepped into the hall. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mark said you've been acting strange. He's worried about you." She didn't know. She still trusted him. And now, he was using her to get to me. Sarah's words cut deeper than any threat from Mark. He was turning my own daughter against me. I wanted to keep Sarah from knowing the truth until I had solid evidence, but I risked losing her trust. I felt the pressure of her confused loyalty. I had to act normal. "I'm just worried, dear," I said, forcing a smile. "It's been hard on all of us." She hugged me, and I felt the weight of her grief. I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. After she left, I knew I had to find that black sedan. I remembered part of the license plate. It started with XJ. I called Eleanor back. I didn't give details, but I asked if her son could check a partial plate through his legal contacts. She said she'd try. While I waited, I went through old family photos on the computer, looking for any clue I might have missed. In the background of a picture from Lily's birthday party, I saw it. The same black sedan, parked down the street. It was there months before she disappeared. This was planned. Long planned. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Stop looking, or else. The message was clear. They knew I was still investigating. I deleted it immediately, my hands trembling. How were they tracking me? I thought about the devices in my house. Could there be a bug? I started searching, quietly, methodically, under tables, behind paintings. I found nothing. But then I remembered the new carbon monoxide detector Mark insisted on installing last month. He said it was for my safety. I stood on a chair and examined it. It looked normal, but when I twisted it, a small, sleek device fell out. A listening device. He had bugged my home. I left the bug on the counter, right where Mark would see it. Let him know I knew. I aimed to push him into a mistake, to make him reveal himself. The risk was that I was heightening the confrontation, placing myself in immediate peril. The pressure was now a tangible thing, a tightness in my chest. I packed a small bag with essentials, medications, some cash, the key to the safety deposit box. I couldn't stay here tonight. I called David and told him about the bug and the threat. He urged me to leave immediately and meet him at his office. He said he had news. I took a bus across town, watching for any tails. No one followed. David's office was in a modest building, away from the main streets. He let me in, his face serious. I ran the partial plate, he said. The car is registered to a shell company, but I traced it back to a man named Arthur Brigham. He's a known associate in questionable financial arrangements. He showed me a picture on his computer. It was the man from the sedan, the one Mark handed the envelope to. Mrs. Gable, this is getting too big for you to handle alone. I've contacted a friend in the FBI. They're willing to listen, but they need more. They need something that directly links Mark to Lily's disappearance. I thought about the storage unit key, the phone. I have it, I said, in a safety deposit box. We made a plan to retrieve it tomorrow and go to the federal building. But as I was leaving his office, my phone rang. It was Sarah, sobbing. Mum, you need to come home. Now. The police are here. They're saying you've been mismanaging your finances, that you're not competent. Mark filed a petition for guardianship. I stood frozen on the sidewalk outside David's office. Guardianship. Mark was trying to have me declared incompetent to control me and my assets. My focus changed immediately. I needed to challenge this in court without delay, before they could institutionalize me. What was at stake was my liberty and my chance to save Lily. The pressure was overwhelming. The system could be slow, and if they succeeded, I'd lose everything. I called David back inside, and he agreed to represent me. We drove to my house together. 2 uniformed officers were there with a social worker. Mark stood beside Sarah, his arm around her, looking every bit the concerned son-in-law. She's been confused, officer, Mark said, his voice dripping with false worry. Forgetting things, spending money erratically. We're just worried for her safety. Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. The social worker, a young woman with a clipboard, asked me questions about my daily routine, my medications. I answered calmly, clearly. I showed her my organized pillbox, my balanced checkbook. David intervened, presenting himself as my legal counsel and challenging the petition as baseless. The officers left, saying the matter would go before a judge. The social worker followed, but not before giving me a sympathetic look. Once they were gone, Mark's mask slipped. "You should have stayed out of it, Mom," he whispered as he passed me in the hall. I didn't respond. I went to my room and locked the door. I had to get that evidence to the FBI now. But as I was planning my next move, I heard Sarah crying in the living room. Then her voice, clear and sharp through the door. "Mark, what did you do with Lily's college fund? I just saw the statement. It's empty." There was a long silence. Then Mark's voice, low and cold. "We needed it for the search, Sarah. It's gone." But I knew the truth. It was gone long before she disappeared. And Sarah was starting to see the cracks. Sarah's question about the college fund hung in the air like a thunderclap. I stood frozen behind my bedroom door, listening. Mark's answer was a weak excuse about search expenses, but the silence that followed was filled with Sarah's quiet sobs. She was starting to see the truth. I had to act now, to get Sarah on my side before Mark could manipulate her further. I knew what I had to do. I needed to speak with Sarah alone and show her the evidence. The risk was terrifying. If I misstepped, I could push her further into his arms. I felt immense pressure. Mark was in the next room, and I could hear him trying to calm her, his voice a low, controlling murmur. I waited until I heard him go into the kitchen. Then I cracked my door open. Sarah was alone on the couch, her head in her hands. I slipped out and sat beside her, placing a hand on her back. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "Sarah, honey," I whispered. "We need to talk, not here." I scribbled a note and pressed it into her hand. "Meet me at the library tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone. It's about Lily." She looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion and fear, but she gave a tiny nod. Just then, Mark called from the kitchen. "Sarah? Where are you?" She quickly stuffed the note into her pocket and stood up, avoiding my eyes. I retreated to my room, my heart pounding. I had taken the first step. But the risk was high. If Mark found that note, everything would collapse. I spent a sleepless night, every creak of the house sounding like his footsteps. In the morning, I pretended to have a doctor's appointment and left early. I went to the bank first, retrieving the evidence from the safety deposit box. I needed to have it ready for Sarah. The library was quiet at that hour. I found a secluded corner in the reference section and waited. 10 o'clock came and went. Sarah wasn't there. My hope began to fade. Had Mark intercepted the note? Had she chosen to believe him? I was about to leave when I saw her hurrying in, her face pale. She slid into the chair opposite me. "Mum, what is this about?" she asked, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath and laid out the copies of the bank statements and the text messages. "Your husband didn't just lose Lily," I said softly. "He sold her." Her eyes scanned the documents, disbelief turning to horror. Then she looked up, her face crumbling. "There's more," she whispered. "Last night, I found a hidden folder on his computer. Passports, fake ones, for him and for Arthur Brigham." Sarah's revelation about the fake passports changed everything. Mark was planning to run. I knew I had to get this new information to David and the FBI immediately. The heartbreaking part was the utter devastation on my daughter's face. The family was irreparably broken. Now it was a race against time. Mark could flee at any moment, taking any chance of finding Lily with him. We had to move fast and carefully. We left the library separately to avoid suspicion. I called David from a payphone, my voice hushed. I told him about the passports. He said he would contact his FBI friend right away and urged me to stay in a public place. I went to a busy diner, ordering coffee I didn't drink, watching the door. Every person who walked in made my heart jump. Sarah had gone home to act normal. to not alert Mark. It was a dangerous game she was playing. I felt a fierce pride in her courage, mixed with a mother's fear for her safety. My phone vibrated. A text from Sarah. "He's packing a bag. Says it's for a business trip. I'm scared." I texted back, "Stay calm. Help is coming." I relayed this to David. He called back minutes later. "The FBI is interested. They want to meet us today. But they need something concrete, something that places Lily with Brigham. Do you have anything else?" I thought of the prepaid phone from the storage unit. It was in the safety deposit box. I had the copies, but the actual phone was better evidence. I told him I could get it. I left the diner and headed back to the bank. As I walked, I felt exposed. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Mark or that black sedan. At the bank, I accessed my box and retrieved the phone. I held it in my hand, this small device that held the key to my granddaughter's fate. As I was leaving the vault, I saw the bank manager, Linda, talking to a man in a suit near the entrance. The man turned slightly. It was Arthur Brigham. He was here. My blood ran cold. How did he know? I ducked behind a desk, my breath caught in my throat. He was looking right at the safety deposit box area. I stayed hidden behind the desk, my heart hammering. Brigham was speaking with Linda, his posture relaxed, as if he belonged there. Did he know about my box? Had Mark told him? I had to get out of the bank with the phone without being seen. Failing meant losing this crucial evidence, which was unthinkable. The pressure felt physical, a tightness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I waited, watching as Brigham finished his conversation and walked out, not glancing back. I took a deep breath and stood, smoothing my dress. I had to act normal. I walked out of the bank, the phone clutched in my purse. Outside, I scanned the street. No sign of Brigham or his car. I hailed a taxi and gave David's office address. As we drove, I kept checking the rearview mirror, but no one followed. At David's office, I handed him the phone. He examined it. "This is good," he said. "Very good. My contact, Agent Miller, is waiting for us at the Federal Building. Let's go." We took his car. The Federal Building was a stark, imposing structure downtown. Agent Miller was a serious woman in her 40s who listened intently as I laid out everything: the debts, the texts, the storage unit, the fake passports, Brigham's visit to the bank. She took the phone and the documents. "This is compelling," she said. "We'll need to verify this, but if it checks out, we can move quickly. We'll put surveillance on Mark and Brigham." She advised me to go home and act as if nothing had happened, to not tip them off. David drove me home. The house was quiet when I entered. Sarah was in the kitchen washing dishes. She gave me a nervous look. "Mark's in the study," she mouthed. I nodded and went to my room. I tried to read, to seem normal, but my mind was racing. Later that evening, Mark knocked on my door. He came in, his face unreadable. "I'm going out of town for a few days, Mom," he said. "Business. You and Sarah behave yourselves." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. After he left, I went to the window. I saw him get into his car, but he didn't drive away immediately. He just sat there, looking at the house. Then his phone lit up, and he started talking, his expression angry. He was arguing with someone. After a minute, he threw the phone down and sped off. I had a sick feeling. He wasn't going on a business trip. He was running. Mark was on the move. I needed to alert Agent Miller immediately and make sure Sarah was safe. I was terrified that he might take Sarah with him or harm her. The pressure was overwhelming. Every second mattered. I called David, who patched me through to Agent Miller. I told her Mark had left, claiming a business trip but acting suspiciously. She said they would track his car and put out an alert. She also advised that Sarah and I should not stay in the house alone in case he returned. I went to Sarah and told her everything. She was terrified, but resolute. "I'm not going with him, Mum. I can't." We packed a few things and decided to go to a hotel for the night. As we were leaving, the doorbell rang. We froze. I peered through the peephole. It was a woman I didn't recognize, holding a clipboard. "Social services," she called out. "We have a follow-up visit regarding the guardianship petition." My blood ran cold. Mark had scheduled this now, of all times. Was it a coincidence or a distraction? I opened the door slightly. The woman introduced herself as Ms. Gable, which was an odd coincidence. She asked to come in to complete her assessment. I knew we couldn't stay. "I'm sorry. We have a family emergency and need to leave immediately," I said, trying to sound firm. She insisted, saying it would only take a few minutes. Sarah stepped forward. "We have to go now," she said, her voice shaking but clear. The woman's eyes narrowed, but she finally stepped back, making a note on her clipboard. We hurried to my car and drove to a modest hotel on the other side of town. I paid in cash to avoid a paper trail. In the room, Sarah broke down. "What if we're too late? What if he's already gone?" I held her, feeling her tremble. My phone buzzed. It was David. The FBI tracked Mark's car to the airport. He was meeting Brigham. They've taken them both into custody for questioning. Relief washed over me, so profound I nearly dropped the phone. But then David's voice turned grim. "There's a problem. They found flight manifests. Mark and Brigham had tickets to a country with no extradition. But Lily's name wasn't on any manifest. They don't know where she is. Mark was in custody, but Lily was still missing. The relief was instantly replaced by a new, sharper fear. Now I had to find out what Mark knew about Lily's whereabouts. Not knowing if she was safe was agonizing, and the FBI needed information quickly to act. We were so close, yet so far. Sarah and I stayed in the hotel that night, too wired to sleep. Agent Miller called early in the morning. "Mark isn't talking," she said. "He's lawyered up. Brigham is denying everything. We need something to break them." I thought about the storage unit. Had we missed something? I asked Agent Miller if her team had searched it thoroughly. She said they had, but found only financial records. Then I remembered the key fob. It had a number, but also a small, almost invisible logo. A bird. I'd seen that logo before. On a brochure for a private airfield an hour north of the city. It was a place where small planes took off, no questions asked. Could that be connected? I told Agent Miller. She was skeptical, but agreed to send a team to check it out. Sarah and I waited in the hotel room, the silence heavy between us. Hours passed. Finally, my phone rang. It was Agent Miller, her voice excited. "We found it. At the airfield, there's a hangar registered to one of Brigham's shell companies. Inside, we found records. Shipping manifests. Not for goods, for people." She paused. "And we found a ledger. It lists Lily by a code name, but the dates match. She was sent to a remote community upstate, a place that's been under investigation for forced labor. We have a location." I sank onto the bed, tears streaming down my face. Sarah grabbed my hand, her eyes begging for news. "They found her," I whispered. "They know where she is." The FBI was mobilizing a raid. We were told to stay put, that it was too dangerous. But as we sat there, holding on to each other, I knew this wasn't over. We had a location. But was she still there? Was she alive? The wait was going to be the hardest part. The phone in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and all we could do was hope. The phone felt heavy in my hand as we waited in that quiet motel room. My daughter Sarah paced back and forth, her steps soft on the thin carpet. We were waiting for a call from Mrs. Miller, the nice woman helping us with family court. She was supposed to tell us about my granddaughter Lily's safety. At my age, a grandmother with grown children and grandbabies, I never thought I'd be hiding in a place like this. Every tick from that cheap wall clock grated on my nerves. I was so worried about Mark's lawyers working against us. I tried to make a cup of tea to settle myself, but my hands were shaking and I spilled hot water. Sarah didn't even notice. She was staring out the window like Mark's car might pull up any second. "What if she's not there, Mum?" she whispered, her voice all tight. A deep sadness washed over me. My heart ached for both of us, suffering because we trusted the wrong man and didn't see the family troubles coming sooner. When dusk started to settle, my phone finally buzzed. It was Mrs. Miller. I put her on speaker so Sarah could hear. "We have legal permission to proceed," she said, her voice steady but concerned. "But there's a hitch. The extended family is bigger than we thought, and they're not cooperating. It could take hours to check all their properties." My heart just dropped. Hours? In that time, Lily could be moved or hidden away. Every delay felt endless. Sarah sank down on the bed and covered her face with her hands. I took a deep breath to stay calm. "Is there anything we can do?" I asked. "Any idea where she might be?" Mrs. Miller paused. "We have a volunteer watching the area, but it's spread out. We're doing all we can." Then she added, "There's more. We heard talk of a transfer happening tonight. If we don't find her before dark, she could be out of reach for good." Her words hit me hard. This wasn't just a search anymore. It felt like a race against the clock. After we hung up, I looked at Sarah. Her eyes were wide with fear. We needed to do something, but we felt so trapped. Then I remembered an old map I'd seen months ago in Mark's home office, tucked away in a drawer. It showed property lines and old trails in that very area. I quickly scrolled through the photos on my phone and found it, a detailed map Mark had once bragged about for his investment plans. Zooming in, I spotted a little path leading to a secluded cabin that wasn't on any public records. Could that be where they were keeping Lily? I showed it to Sarah. "We have to send this to Mrs. Miller right now," I told her. But just as I went to dial, my phone screen went black. The battery had died, and I'd forgotten my charger in our rush to leave home. We were completely cut off, sitting there with a possible clue and no way to tell a soul. I felt so helpless. My phone was dead, and I felt so helpless. I had to charge it right away to send that crucial information about my granddaughter Lily. Time was slipping away, and this felt like our last hope. My daughter Sarah was weeping on the hotel bed, and my 72 years ached in every joint. It was a sharp reminder I can't keep up like I used to. I hurried to the room phone and called the front desk. I asked the young man there if they had a charger for my phone. He said he'd check the lost and found and bring one up if he found it. I stood by the door, waiting and listening for his footsteps. Sarah's sobs tore at my heart. I felt a hot rush of anger at my son-in-law Mark and at myself for not being better prepared. When the knock came, I opened the door to the clerk with a universal charger. I thanked him, plugged in my phone, and whispered a prayer for it to power up. That phone took forever to show any life. When the screen lit up, I called Detective Miller first, but it went to voicemail. Next, I tried my son David. He picked up immediately. "Mum, I've been calling. The police hit a wall. They need warrants for each place they check. and it's slowing everything down. My heart sank. I told him about the map I had, and he promised to get it to the police. Then he added, Mark is trying to cut a deal. He's offering to reveal Lily's location for immunity. The news left me reeling. Mark was bargaining with my granddaughter's safety. Sarah overheard and shook her head. No, Mom. Don't believe a word of it. He's lying. I agreed completely. Then Detective Miller called back, her voice strained. We received your map. A team is headed to that cabin now. But Mark's lawyer is here, pushing hard. If Mark talks, we may have to consider it. A cold dread settled in my chest. What if Mark's information was just a stall or a way to lead us astray? We waited, that charger cord feeling like our only connection to hope. About an hour later, Detective Miller called again. We reached the cabin. It was empty, but there were clear signs someone had been there recently. We found a child's hair tie, just like Lily's. For a second, my hope lifted. But then she said, There was a note for you, Mrs. Gable. It reads, You should have stayed out of it. Now she's really gone. Those words hung in the air, cruel and mocking. Mark hadn't just hidden her, he'd set a false trail to torment us. Now the trail had gone cold again, and all we had was that hateful message. That note was meant to crush me, but it only made me stronger. At 72, I'm a grandmother to my sweet granddaughter Lily, and I've faced plenty of troubles in my life. But this lit a fire inside me. I felt a steady anger. My son-in-law Mark thought he could push me around, but I decided to use every legal way to make him answer. I had to find Lily myself, if it came to that. Any bit of peace I had was gone, replaced by a fierce need to protect my family. I called my lawyer, David, back. My voice was firm, even though my hands were shaking. No deals for Mark, I told him. After all he's done, he doesn't get to bargain. David agreed, but he warned that the court might consider it if it helped find Lily faster. I understood, but I couldn't stomach it. My daughter Sarah and I packed up and left the hotel. Staying there felt like hiding, and at my age, I'm too old for that. We drove to the federal building in my sedan. The streets were crowded, and I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see one of Mark's associates. But everything looked normal. It felt lonely, like our family crisis was invisible to the rest of the world. At the federal building, they put us in a plain white room to wait. Agent Miller came in after a while, looking tired. She said they were following every lead and that the note was a setback, but they were checking it for clues. She told us they'd frozen Mark's and his partner Brigham's bank accounts, so they couldn't pay for any more schemes. Then she handed me a paper. This is the guardianship petition Mark filed, she explained. We're using it as evidence that he was trying to control you and your affairs. I felt a grim satisfaction. The very thing he meant to use against me was now turning on him. But then Agent Miller's phone buzzed. She listened, and her face grew tense. After she hung up, she said, We have a problem. Mark's lawyer was claiming that I knew all about the family debts and had agreed to send Lily away to save us from financial ruin. The accusation was so ridiculous I almost laughed. But then the weight of it hit me. I was shocked and furious. He was trying to drag me down with him. Sarah gasped beside me. That's a lie. How can he say that? Agent Miller nodded. It's a common trick, she said. But we need to disprove it fast. Do you have any records, like emails or notes, that show you were against this? I thought hard. I'd thrown out a lot in anger over the years, but then I remembered the journal I kept after my husband passed. I'd written about my fears of Mark's spending and my worries for Lily's future. It was in a box up in my attic. If I could find it, it might clear my name and show his guilt. But going back home meant walking right into whatever traps Mark might have set there. That accusation hung over me like a heavy cloud. At my age, with grown children and a granddaughter to look out for, I couldn't let this lie stand. I needed to get that old journal from my attic to clear my name and strengthen our case against Mark, my no-good son-in-law. I had to fetch it without walking into any of his sneaky setups. Going back to the house where he'd spread so many lies was hard on my heart. The whole situation was weighing on me. If Mark's story started to stick, I could be pushed aside right when my granddaughter Lily needed me most. My daughter Sarah insisted on coming along. We drove over in silence, and the familiar streets felt strange and unwelcoming. The house was dark when we arrived. When I turned the key, the lock stuck, and my heart skipped a beat. Inside, everything was just as we'd left it, but the place felt empty, almost haunted by all the betrayal. We headed straight for the attic. The pull-down ladder groaned under us. My knees aren't as strong as they used to be. The air was thick with dust, and boxes were piled everywhere. I knew exactly where the journal was, tucked in an old trunk with my late husband's belongings. As I sorted through that trunk, my fingers brushed against the leather cover. I felt such a wave of relief. But then Sarah, who was keeping watch by the attic door, whispered, "Mum, I think someone's outside." I froze and listened. There was a soft scraping sound, like a shoe on the porch. My mind raced. Was it the police or someone Mark had sent? I was scared. We felt so exposed up there. I slipped the journal into my bag, and we crept downstairs. Peeking out the front window, I saw a man in a suit walking away. I didn't recognize him. He got into a car and drove off. Was he a process server? Maybe a reporter? Not knowing made me uneasy. We decided to leave right away. But as we reached the door, my landline phone rang, startling us both. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick it up. It was Mark's lawyer. "Mrs. Gable?" he said, all smooth and polite. "I advise you to reconsider your position. My client is willing to drop the guardianship petition if you drop the charges. Think of your family." His offer was tempting in a way, but it made me angry. He was giving me a way out of this legal mess, but it meant giving up on justice for Lily. Sarah shook her head, her eyes full of fire. I took a deep breath. "No deal," I said, and hung up. But as we stepped outside, a car pulled up sharply. It was a news van, and a reporter jumped out with a microphone. "Mrs. Gable, is it true you were involved in your granddaughter's disappearance?" The question felt like a public slap, and I realized Mark's side was playing a bigger game, trying to ruin my reputation right here in the neighborhood where it matters most. That reporter's question felt like a slap in the face, right there in my own kitchen. At my age, with grown children and grandchildren who trust me, I couldn't believe someone would spread such ugly lies. My granddaughter Sarah stood beside me, trembling, and all those cameras made my stomach turn. I was so angry and humiliated. I took Sarah's arm and guided her to my old car. "No comment," I said, though my hands shook on the wheel once we were inside. Sarah cried quietly. "Grandma, how can they say these things?" she asked. I didn't know what to tell her, so I drove us straight to my lawyer's office downtown. I handed over my personal journal. It's full of notes about the money tricks my son-in-law Mark has been playing. My lawyer, Mrs. Miller, promised to look it over right away to fight his false claims. When we got back to my small apartment, I dropped into my favorite armchair, worn out but more determined than ever. That journal was a start, but we needed real proof. Then my son David called. "Good news, Mom," he said. "The bank found a backup file in Mark's old office papers. It lists all his shady deals, including when he sold off Lily's inheritance share. There's even talk of a second property, a farmhouse, a couple towns over where they've been hiding money and documents when things get tough. I felt a wave of relief. This was exactly what we needed. But David's voice turned serious. The bad news is that farmhouse belongs to Mark's cousin, and we heard it's locked up tight with alarms and maybe a guard dog. The financial investigators are going to serve papers and check the place tomorrow. But it's risky. My stomach knotted up with worry. Can we be nearby? Just to keep an eye out? I asked. David warned us not to, but Sarah and I insisted. We had to feel like we were doing something, so we agreed to book a room at a motel in the next town, away from all the fuss. As we packed a small bag, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but I picked it up. A distorted, robotic voice came through, slow and menacing. "Stop digging, old woman, or you'll lose everything, your home, your family, all of it." Then the call ended. My heart pounded, but instead of fear, I felt a cold, steady resolve. They were scared because we were getting close to the truth. That told me we were on the right track. Sarah and I got into the car and started driving, the night dark around us. But that new clue shining like a porch light guiding us home. The motel was a dreary place off the highway, its neon sign flickering in the night. Sarah and I checked in under false names, paying cash, as David had advised. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach. I bolted the door behind us, my hands still shaking from that robotic threat. We had to stay hidden until the financial investigators moved on the farmhouse at dawn. We were living with this constant fear, hiding like criminals in our own lives. I felt the pressure of every passing minute, wondering if Mark's associates had tracked us here. Sarah collapsed on one of the twin beds, exhausted. I sat by the window, peering through the gap in the curtains at the parking lot. Every set of headlights made my heart jump. I needed to be alert, to protect us both. But my eyes were heavy, and my arthritis throbbed with a dull ache. I thought of Lily, wondering if she was safe, if she was warm. The not knowing was a physical pain in my chest. Around midnight, a car pulled in and parked 2 spaces down. A man got out, alone. He didn't go to any room. He just sat on the hood, smoking a cigarette, staring at our window. My breath caught. Was he watching us? I woke Sarah quietly and pointed. She peered out, her face pale. "What do we do, Mum?" she whispered. I told her to pack our bags, just in case. We had to be ready to run. But then the man's phone rang. He answered, spoke briefly, then got back in his car and drove away. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The farmhouse is clean, nothing there." It was from Agent Miller. My heart sank. Had they already searched it? But it was only 1 a.m. They weren't supposed to move until morning. I showed Sarah. "Something's wrong," she said. "Why would she text now?" I called Agent Miller's direct line. It went straight to voicemail. I tried David. No answer. A cold dread settled in my stomach. That text wasn't from Agent Miller. Someone was trying to mislead us, to make us give up. And they knew we were involved. The fake text meant someone was intercepting our communications. I had to assume our phones were compromised. I urgently needed to find a secure way to contact David or Agent Miller and warn them about the breach. We felt completely isolated, cut off from our only allies. The pressure mounted as I imagined the investigators walking into a trap at the farmhouse because of us. I decided we had to leave the motel immediately. We couldn't risk staying there. Sarah and I gathered our things and slipped out the back door into the cool night air. We walked several blocks to a 24-hour diner I'd seen on the drive in. It was brightly lit, with a few truckers scattered at the counter. We took a booth in the corner. I used the payphone near the restrooms to call David's landline, the number I'd memorized years ago. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Mum? What's wrong?" I told him about the text and our suspicions. He was silent for a moment. "That's not good," he said. "The raid is still scheduled for 6 a.m. I'll alert Agent Miller. Where are you?" I gave him the diner's name. "Stay there. I'll send someone to pick you up." Hanging up, I felt a sliver of relief. But as I returned to our booth, I saw Sarah talking to a waitress. The waitress handed her a note. Sarah's face was ashen. "What is it?" I asked. She passed me the note. It read, "Tell the old lady to back off, or the girl gets hurt." It was signed with a crude drawing of a bird, the same logo from the storage key fob. My blood ran cold. They had found us, even here, and they were threatening Lily directly now. I scanned the diner. The truckers were minding their own business. The waitress was back behind the counter, not looking at us. Who had given her the note? She pointed vaguely toward the door. "A man in a hat dropped it off," she said. "He's gone." We were being watched, and they knew exactly where we were. The game had escalated, and Lily was the pawn. We couldn't wait for David's help. The threat to Lily was immediate. I had to get us to safety and somehow relay this new development to the authorities. Our sense of security was fading fast. We felt like mice in a maze. The pressure was unbearable, knowing that every move we made was being monitored. I left cash on the table for the coffee we hadn't touched, and Sarah and I hurried out the back exit of the diner. We cut through an alley, my heart pounding in my ears. I needed a phone that wasn't traced. I remembered a friend from my church who lived a few miles away. We started walking, sticking to shadowy side streets. It was a long walk for my old legs, but fear kept me moving. After what felt like an hour, we reached Betty's house. I knocked softly on her door, hoping she wasn't a heavy sleeper. After a minute, a light came on, and Betty opened the door, wrapped in a robe. Her eyes widened when she saw us. "Martha, what in the world?" I apologized for the hour and explained we needed to use her phone. She ushered us in, concerned. I called David from her landline and told him about the note and the bird logo. He said he'd inform Agent Miller and that a car was on the way to Betty's. While we waited, Betty made us tea. Sarah finally broke down, sobbing into her hands. Betty patted her back, humming a hymn. It was a small moment of peace in the storm. But then, headlights flashed through the window. A car pulled up outside. It wasn't David's. It was a dark sedan, the same one I'd seen at the bank. My breath caught. How did they find us here? We had been so careful. Betty peered out. "Who's that?" she asked. I pulled Sarah away from the window. "We have to go now," I whispered. Betty, bless her, didn't hesitate. She led us through her kitchen to the backyard, toward her gardening shed. "Hide in there," she said. "I'll distract them." As we slipped into the dark shed, I heard the doorbell ring. Betty answered, her voice cheerful. "Can I help you?" A man's voice replied, "We're looking for an elderly woman and her daughter. Have you seen them?" Betty played dumb, but I knew we couldn't stay. The shed had a back door that led to an alley. We crept out, but as we did, I saw something tucked under a pile of pots. A child's sweater, pink and familiar. It was Lily's. My heart stopped. What was it doing here? Lily's sweater in Betty's shed meant she had been here, or someone wanted us to think so. My mind raced. Was Betty involved? Or was this another cruel trick? I had to get us out of there and figure out what this meant. It felt like a betrayal of trust, even in a friend's home. The pressure was intense, with pursuers likely minutes away. I grabbed the sweater and stuffed it into my bag. Sarah saw it and gasped, but I put a finger to my lips. We hurried down the alley, away from Betty's house. I didn't know where to go. My phone was still off, but I had Betty's landline number memorized. I found another payphone at a gas station a few blocks away. I called Betty's number. She answered, sounding breathless. Martha? They left, but they were asking questions. Are you okay? I asked her about the sweater. There was a long pause. What sweater? She said, genuinely confused. I haven't seen Lily in months. My blood ran cold. Someone had planted it there while we were hiding. I hung up and called David again. He answered immediately. The raid on the farmhouse is underway, he said. But there's a problem. The cousin isn't there, and the place is empty except for some documents. They found records of a transfer scheduled for tonight. Lily is being moved to a different location. We have to find out where. My hope dwindled. We were always one step behind. Then David said, There's more. Mark's lawyer is claiming that you have Lily, that you're hiding her to frame Mark. They're filing a counterpetition. The audacity of it left me speechless. They were turning the tables, making me out to be the villain. Sarah leaned against the payphone booth, tears streaming down her face. How can they do this? She whispered. I felt a surge of defiance. I wouldn't let them win. But as we stood there, a police car pulled into the gas station. 2 officers got out and walked toward us. One of them spoke, his tone official. Are you Martha Gable? He asked. I nodded, my heart in my throat. We have a warrant for your arrest for obstruction of justice and custodial interference. They thought I had Lily. They were taking me in. The officers were polite but firm as they guided me to the patrol car. Sarah was crying, pleading with them that it was a mistake. I told her to call David and stay calm. I intended to clear my name quickly and get back to finding Lily. I was losing my freedom, even temporarily, and facing the humiliation of being arrested. The pressure was overwhelming, knowing that every minute I was detained, Lily was in greater danger. At the police station, they processed me, taking my fingerprints and photograph. I was placed in a holding cell, a small, cold room with a bench. I focused on breathing, on staying calm. David arrived within the hour, his face grim. He spoke with the officers and then came to me. This is Mark's doing, he said. His lawyer provided fabricated evidence, emails supposedly from you discussing Lily's placement. We'll get it thrown out, but it will take time. Time was what we didn't have. I told David about the sweater and Betty's shed. His eyes narrowed. That could be the break we need, he said. If we can prove the sweater was planted, it shows someone is framing you. I'll have Agent Miller send a team to collect it. He left to make calls. I sat alone, the silence pressing in. I thought of my grandchildren, of Lily's smile. I wouldn't let them take that from me. After what felt like an eternity, David returned with a smile. Good news, he said. The financial investigators found a hidden safe at the farmhouse. Inside, there was a ledger with details of Lily's transfer. She's being held at a private camp for troubled youth, owned by one of Brigham's shell companies. It's a place that's been under surveillance for other reasons. The FBI is mobilizing a raid right now. Relief flooded through me. We had a location. But then David's smile faded. There's a catch, he said. The camp is heavily guarded, and they have a policy of no outside interference. If they get wind of the raid, they might move the children before we get there. The danger was greater than ever. I was released on my own recognizance, thanks to David's efforts. As I walked out of the station, Sarah hugged me tightly, but my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Too late? She's already gone? Attached was a blurry photo of a girl who looked like Lily, being led into a van. The timestamp was from an hour ago. My blood ran cold. Were we too late? The photo on my phone felt like a punch to the gut. A blurry image of a girl who looked like Lily being led into a van, with the timestamp from an hour ago. Too late, the message said. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to think. This could be another trick from Mark or his associates to make us give up. I had to verify this immediately with Agent Miller and not let despair cloud my judgment. If we fell for a fake, it could waste precious resources and time. Sarah was sobbing beside me, and I felt the pressure of her grief compounding my own. I called David right there on the sidewalk outside the police station. "We just got a message with a photo," I told him, my voice shaking. "It says Lily's been moved." David listened intently and then said, "Forward it to me. I'll get it to Agent Miller for analysis. Don't jump to conclusions yet." I sent the image, my heart pounding. Every second felt like an eternity. Sarah clung to my arm, her tears wetting my sleeve. I needed to stay strong for her, for Lily. While we waited, I led Sarah to a nearby bench. The city was waking up, people rushing to work, oblivious to our nightmare. I remembered Lily's last birthday, how she laughed when she opened our gift. The memory was a sharp pain. David called back within minutes. "The photo is a fake," he said, his voice firm. "Agent Miller's tech team analyzed it. The timestamp is doctored, and the van in the picture has been in impound for weeks. It's a psychological play to stop us." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. If they were sending fakes, it meant they were desperate. They knew we were close. "The raid on the camp is still a go," David continued. "But we have to move fast. They might be preparing to evacuate for real now." I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just wait. "We're coming to the staging area," I told David. He started to protest, but I cut him off. "We'll stay out of the way, but I need to be there." Hanging up, I looked at Sarah. "We're not too late," I said. She nodded, wiping her tears. We got into my car and started driving toward the coordinates David had sent for the FBI's rendezvous point. As we drove, I noticed a car following us, keeping a steady distance. It was the same dark sedan from before. They were still watching, and now they knew where we were headed. The dark sedan trailed us all the way to the outskirts of town. I had to lose them before we led them straight to the FBI's operation. I had to make sure the raid on the camp went ahead without any interference to protect Lily's chance at rescue. The risk was high. If they followed us, they could alert the camp, endangering everyone. I felt the pressure of the sedan's headlights in my rearview mirror, a constant reminder of their persistence. I took a sudden turn down a narrow country road, away from the main route to the rendezvous point. Sarah gasped. "Mum, where are you going?" I didn't answer, focusing on the winding road. The sedan followed, matching my turns. I remembered this area from years ago when my husband and I would go for drives. There was an old farm with multiple access roads. I sped up, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. My arthritis screamed in protest, but I ignored it. I had to do this for Lily. After a few minutes, I saw the farmhouse ahead. I swung into a dirt path that circled behind it, kicking up dust. The sedan followed, but I knew this land better. I accelerated, heading for a thicket of trees that hid a forgotten trail. As I plunged into the cover, the sedan hesitated, then stopped, unable to follow through the rough terrain. I kept driving until I was sure we were alone, then doubled back toward the main road using a different route. Sarah was pale, but silent, her trust in me absolute. We reached the rendezvous point, a secluded parking lot near a state park. Several unmarked cars were already there. Agent Miller approached us, her expression stern. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "But since you're here, stay in the car. We move in 10 minutes. I nodded, relief mixing with anxiety. But as she walked away, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Betty. "Martha," she said, her voice urgent. "After you left, I found something else in the shed. A receipt for a storage unit in the next county, under Brigham's name. I thought you should know." I thanked her and hung up. Why would Brigham have another storage unit? I mentioned it to Agent Miller, who radioed her team to check it out. Then, over the radio, we heard the team at the camp report movement. Vehicles were starting to leave. They were evacuating. Agent Miller shouted orders to move in immediately. The raid was happening now, but we were racing against time. The sound of engines roaring to life filled the air as the FBI cars sped toward the camp. Sarah and I were left behind in the parking lot under the watch of a young agent. I needed to know what was happening, to feel useful instead of helpless. Doing nothing could be catastrophic. Lily was so close. I felt the pressure of every second, imagining her being driven away again. I got out of the car, ignoring the agent's protests, and walked to the edge of the trees where I could see the camp entrance in the distance. Through binoculars, I saw agents swarming the place, but several vans were already pulling out onto the main road. My heart sank. Were they too late? Then, over the agent's radio, I heard chaos, shouts, the sound of doors being forced open. But one voice cut through. "We have multiple juveniles, but no sign of the target. She's not here." The words hit me like a physical blow. Lily wasn't there. All this effort, and she was gone. Sarah came up beside me, her face crumpling. "Where is she?" she whispered. I felt a surge of anger and determination. This wasn't over. I remembered Betty's call about the new storage unit. What if that was where they took her? A place to hide her temporarily during the raid. I rushed back to the agent. "Tell Agent Miller about the storage unit Betty mentioned. Now!" He relayed the message, and after a moment, Agent Miller's voice came back, strained. "We're sending a unit there, but it's 20 minutes away. If she's there, we might not make it in time." I couldn't wait 20 minutes. I looked at Sarah, then at the keys in my hand. "We're going," I said. The agent tried to stop us, but I was already in the driver's seat. Sarah jumped in, and we sped out of the parking lot, heading for the storage facility. I drove faster than I ever had, my mind focused on one thing: getting to Lily. As we approached the facility, I saw a single van parked near one of the units, its engine running. The door to Unit 42 was open, and a man was hurriedly loading boxes. But then I saw a small, frightened face peek out from the back of the van. It was Lily. My granddaughter was right there. Lily was in that van, so close I could almost touch her. I had to get her out before they drove away. What I needed to do was immediate and clear: rescue my granddaughter. The risk was terrifying. These men were desperate and might harm her. I felt the pressure of the van's engine running, ready to leave at any moment. I slammed my car to a stop, blocking the van's path. "Stay here," I told Sarah, but she was already getting out with me. The man loading boxes looked up, startled. He was big, dressed in work clothes, and he started toward us. Get back in your car, old lady, he snarled. I stood my ground, my heart pounding. That's my granddaughter, I said, my voice steady despite my fear. He laughed, a harsh sound. Not anymore. Just then, I heard sirens in the distance. The FBI was on their way. The man heard it too, and his expression changed from anger to panic. He rushed to the van's driver's side, but I moved faster, yanking the passenger door open. Lily was inside, tied to a seat, her eyes wide with terror. "Grandma!" she cried. I started fumbling with the ropes, my old fingers clumsy. Sarah joined me, working on the knots. The man got into the driver's seat and started the van. "Get out!" he yelled, but I clung to Lily. He began to reverse, dragging us with him. Sarah screamed, but I held on, finally loosening the ropes enough for Lily to slip free. We tumbled out onto the concrete just as the van sped backward, crashing into my car. The impact jarred us, but we were safe on the ground. The sirens grew louder, and FBI cars swarmed into the facility. Agents surrounded the van, pulling the man out. Lily was in my arms, sobbing. Sarah hugged us both, tears streaming down her face. Agent Miller ran over, her face a mix of relief and concern. "We have him," she said, "and we have Brigham in custody too. It's over." I held Lily tighter, feeling her small body shake against mine. She was thin and pale, but she was alive. We had her back. The days that followed were a blur of doctors, police statements, and quiet moments at home. Lily was safe, sleeping in her own bed again, with Sarah by her side every night. My house felt whole once more, filled with the sounds of family instead of silence and fear. I sat in my rocking chair, a blanket over my knees, watching the sun set through the window. The legal proceedings against Mark and Brigham were underway, and their web of deceit was unraveling quickly. We had paid a high price, trust broken, hearts scarred, but we had survived. I thought about all that had happened, from finding that key in the garage to the final rescue at the storage unit. It had aged me, no doubt, but it had also shown me a strength I didn't know I still possessed. My children and grandchildren were my world, and protecting them was worth any struggle. Sarah and I talked for hours, rebuilding our bond, healing the wounds that Mark's betrayal had inflicted. Lily was slowly opening up, her smiles returning, though the shadows in her eyes would take time to fade. I received a letter from the district attorney, thanking me for my courage and detailing the evidence that would ensure Mark faced justice. The guardianship petition was dismissed, and my name was cleared completely. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not of revenge, but of justice served. The family was mending, piece by piece. One evening, Sarah and Lily baked cookies, the smell of chocolate chip filling the house. I watched them from the kitchen table, my heart full. Lily brought me a cookie, still warm from the oven. "For you, Grandma," she said, hugging me. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. This was what mattered. This was home. The past was behind us, and the future, though uncertain, was ours to shape together. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for now, in this moment, we were safe, we were loved, and we were a family again.